Thank you, WMG, for having me here. Thank you, Rajesh. I almost didn't make it 2 weeks ago because and I take objection to the fact that you say I'm unbiased. No, I don't think if you're a journalist, you can be unbiased. You can be unbiased about the facts, but not about their conclusions. Otherwise, you will not want to change anything. So, objectivity is not something that I carry around with me. And that got me into a little bit of trouble because the great, glorious, democratic state of Karnataka decided to prosecute me for a comment I made criticizing a certain aspect of their policy. So we live really in a country where we expect people to be completely unbiased. And when they are, like I was, you try to put them in jail. But that's a whole different story. And thank you, Rajesh, for still sticking with me. Look, I already inflict myself upon you every evening. So I thank you very much for being here and receiving this in person. I was very taken by what Ram Madhavji said. He made such a beautiful point about finding ourselves, you know. If you don't find yourself, you can't shape your destiny. And that's really why I wrote this book. People ask me why I write it, so I will share that with you for a few moments. For many years, I had been fixating on this phrase, tryst with destiny. It entered India's collective lexicon through that beautiful speech that Jawaharlal Nehruji delivered on the midnight of August 15, 1947. The speech was thought to be epical. Why? Because many friends on the center left of the spectrum said it was the first ever enunciation of a liberal, modernist, progressive idea of India. Idea of India. But destiny, as we all know, is a function of history. We know how much we've traveled only when we know from where we actually began. It's all relative. Einstein told us this. But what if a nation's history was founded on an idea of India imagined largely by its colonizers and handed out to their chosen few legatees? What if a nation's history was founded on an idea of India that denied its Sanatani, dharmic, civilizational origins and therefore its heritage? Think about that, because I do almost on a daily basis, reflecting back on what I learned, history that was written by my aunt, Romila Thapar. I come from that family, so I know. What sense of destiny could such a nation aspire to when, for example, it censored its own national song, Vande Mataram, scripted by one of its greatest sons and nationalists just because it was deemed incongruous to the sensitivities of the outlook of some minorities that colonized and then divided Bharatvarsha? And I want us to focus very quickly on a little excerpt. The first one that we will bring up on your screens, on Vande Mataram. Before independence, as we all know, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Vande Mataram, this great unabashed ode to nationalism, was shot down by the Muslim League. Its leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, wrote an article in 1938 for the New Times of Lahore to distance Muslims from Chattopadhyay's exhortation. Muslims all over India have refused to accept Vande Mataram or any expurgated edition of the anti-Muslim song as a binding national anthem. Jinnah expressed his disdain for what is today our national song, despite Jawaharlal Nehru making a major concession to Muslims. over the song in October 1937. Bowing to Muslim sentiments, the Congress Working Committee met in Kolkata under his presidentship and resolved to sing only the first two stanzas of the song. Wherever Vande Mataram is sung at national gatherings, only the first two stanzas should be sung, with perfect freedom to the organizers to sing any other song of an unobjectionable character in addition to or in place of the Vande Mataram song. But Muslim leaders like Jinnah were still not satisfied, believing that the first two stanzas couldn't be seen in isolation, since motherland was certainly depicted as one of the Hindu pantheon of deities elsewhere too. Indeed, Bharat Mata is often depicted as a goddess in Indian iconography, dressed in a sari, holding a red flag. Now this objection came, and I've captured this, came at a time, or shortly after, a woman called Bhikaji Kama, another minority, unfurled India's national flag in Stuttgart. And what did that flag have on it? It had the words Vande Mataram. Everyone sang that song, not because it was some Hindu hymn. They sang it because it represented a certain ideal of us and our aspiration. And that is, I think, what Ram Madhavji was saying. We must have a unity of purpose. What sense of destiny could such a nation aspire to when, for example, it deemed any attempt to reclaim or even appreciate the grandeur of India's Hindu civilizational past as a descent into communalism? If you, and I think that you might share this experience. Sometimes you might go and say that it was good that we built the Ram Mandir. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination excusing the vandalism that happened, and that was not right, and that was not us. Today, if we are secular, it is because majority of us are Hindu. So what happened that day on the 6th of December wasn't good. My grandmother, displaced Kashmiri Hindu, my Dadiji, I remember I was about 17. And she came into our bedroom. We shared the same bathroom actually. So she would come through and she said, "Wake up. Something horrid has happened." And remember that she had just lived through an exodus a few years before this. So she could have been filled with rage and retribution. But she says, "This is not us. Baba, this is not us." You see, we speak English in our family because my grandfather was a Kannadiga. His name was Tumkur Shivshankar. My grandmother is Kashmiri, Hindu. So there had to be a bridge language, and that was English. Couldn't really communicate. But look, I have captured this. How this has become a problem. If you say today that you support the construction of the Ram Mandir, your friends might say, what has happened to you? Have you become a Sanghi? A Fundu? Fundamentalist, that is. So, how did this come about? Let me take you over this for just a few moments. This is another excerpt. Now, I'm doing what Ram Madhavji said I should not be doing, and my publisher will be upset. I'm giving you a little bit of an insight into the book, which I hope you will buy because it's important. I want to tell you this little excerpt. The reflexive outrage against a directive to make Vande Mataram's more regular part of our national life wasn't surprising. It is symptomatic of a barely disguised contempt towards Hindu civilizational iconography and especially its identification with Indian nationalism. The left has gone to the irrational length of even taking the Hindu out of the Indian. In his book, The Great Hindu Civilization, Pavan K. Verma challenged, for instance, historian Ramila Thapar's attempt to describe historical inquiries into the Hinduness of the Indian civilization as communal and that which excludes the study of others. Verma said, "Why should the study of religion, if it has played a dominant role in influencing the worldview of a historical period, be communal?" Thapar's proposition ignores the evidence that has now been dredged to the surface through more objective research on India's ancient civilizational past. These studies have amply demonstrated that Hinduism itself is the best disincentive against majoritarianism. Wasn't that the reason Mahatma Gandhi invoked Ram, the embodiment of our civilization's tolerant spiritual and moral value system? That is the reason why Ram Madhavji talked about Ram Rajya. What is more tolerant than Ram Rajya? There's just one. And they've done all the research, my friends. They found only one example of a Hindu king who desecrated certain monuments. That isn't true of some other faiths. Wherever they have colonized, the indigenous populations, the indigenous civilizational heritage of those places is gone. Finished. We don't want that here. We want to trace ourselves back to our secular, dharmic, ethical roots so that we can build a great country. As I said, tryst with destiny without knowing your past is no tryst at all. Let me remind you here through a concrete example that Nehru opposed the rebuilding of the Somnath temple because to him it represented a dangerous Hindu revivalism. Again, I'll point you to a little excerpt from the book. You all heard of Mr. Munshi, K.M. Munshi. And this is something that Ram Madhavji has also written about in his book, A Hindutva Paradigm. It's a recollection of what Nehru told him after a cabinet meeting in 1951. I do not like your trying to restore Somnath. It is Hindu revivalism, unquote. Munshi's response to Nehru. He was a congressman. Yesterday you referred to Hindu revivalism. You pointedly referred to me in the cabinet as connected with Somnath. I'm glad you did so. I do not want to keep back any part of my views or activities. I can assure you that the collective subconscious of India today is happier with the scheme of reconstruction of Somnath than with many other things that we have done and are doing. Nehru's letter to Rajendra Prasad in 1951, and he says, "My dear Rajendra Babu, I'm greatly worried about the Somnath affair. As I feared, it is assuming a certain political importance. In criticism of our policy in regard to it, we are asked how a secular government such as ours can associate itself with such a ceremony, which is in addition revivalist in character." Friends, it was as if rights guaranteeing freedom to profess and practice one's religion applied to all but Hindus. You know, a large number of you go to a country that describes itself as a mother of all democracies, America. I'm sure a lot of you have traveled there. Maybe some of you have found your calling and come back to invest in India. I'm told that this is what a lot of people in Bangalore have done, in Bengaluru have done. But America is a Christian nation. America is a profoundly Christian nation. It is not a Christian state. It's a Christian nation. There's a distinction. Yet it safeguards the rights of everyone. And the reason is because Christianity there underwent a change, like in Britain. And I'll come to that in just a few moments. Let me also remind you that this intellectual progeny in the Congress gave us the Places of Worship Act 1991 that barred Hindus from reclaiming their most sacred places of worship for fear of alienating a community. But this same Congress ecosystem has no qualms about championing overseas the right of Aboriginals to reclaim their heritage, sometimes even through force. So when you have movements, let's say the Black Lives Matter movement, they wanted to tear down statues of Confederate generals. In Britain also, it started. There they said, no, we must do it. It's very important because we must know, we must recognize the rights of the indigenous whose history has been steamrolled. If you do it here, My gosh, it's an assault on secularism. I don't know how this happens and why some of us buy into it blindly. I'm not saying take a hammer to things. Even Mohan Bhagwat ji has come out and said very clearly, we can't go around with a spade digging under every mosque to find the remnants of a Hindu temple, etc. But there are some that are important. And that is not revivalism. I would like to ask you, what sense of destiny could such a nation aspire to when from the very beginning, for example, it protected and appeased legally the architecture of separatism, especially Muslim separatism? Why else would it jail Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, a great son of Bharat, for merely leading a march opposing an arrangement that gave us do vidhan, do pradhan or do nishan in our words? 2 constitutions, 2 premiers and 2 flags. This is bizarre. If you want to feel us, you cannot have these emotional distinctions, these barriers. And let me very quickly, I won't bore you with all of it, but let me just take you through a little bit of the letters we have referenced between Shyama Prasad Mukherjee and Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru's letter to Mukherjee, February 5th, 1953, according to my thinking, he says, the agitation of the Praja Parishad in Jammu is not only communal, but is supported by communal and narrow-minded elements in India. I have not a shadow of doubt that if that narrow approach was adopted in our country as a whole, it would bring disaster in its train, not only for Jammu and Kashmir state, but also the larger interests of India. Mukherjee then responds to Nehru on February 8th, 1953. He says, is there anything communal or reactionary or anti-national about it, the agitation that is? If India's constitution is good enough for the rest of India, why should it not be acceptable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir? It is amazing how the move for separatism pursued by Sheikh Abdullah and his colleagues is being applauded by you as national and patriotic, and the genuine desire on part of the Praja Parishad to secure the fundamental unity and integrity of India and to be governed as common Indian citizens is being dubbed as treacherous. Think in your cool moments how in your life history, your failure to stand against Muslim communalism in India has resulted in disastrous consequences. Perhaps you and others followed a policy of concession and appeasement with the highest motive, but in ultimate, the country came to be partitioned against your own repeated declarations to the contrary. Incidentally, Mukherjee died in jail, allegedly ill-treated by his jailers. Why else, I ask you, my friends, why else would a state selectively codify personal laws of only the Hindu community? Why else would a state control only Hindu temples? You're mistaken. You're all mistaken to think that the loss of political power has weakened those who hold the keys to this Nehruvian worldview. His intellectual legacy is hard-coded into our administrative DNA, into our textbooks. And here I'll give you another example. Plate 5. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan sampled this report of the University Education Commission led by Constituent Assembly member Mr. Radhakrishnan in 1948. Now pay attention. This is very important. This is what he said. This is how we design our curriculum. In 1948, regarding the aims of university education in India under the section titled The Spread of Islam, it is written, from very ancient times, India had intimate relations with the Arabs, especially in commerce and trade, and there were land and sea routes established between the two countries. The Muslims were welcomed in India by the Hindu rulers, who permitted them to build mosques and spread their teachings. Indian culture did not believe in compelling people to choose its way of life. It encouraged each group that found its home in India to live by its own conception of the good life. With the advent of the Mughals, the imperial court became the meeting ground of Hindu and Muslim scholars who made themselves familiar with each other's culture. They made themselves familiar with each other's culture by issuing farmans to break down the holiest holy sites of another's culture. Amazing. This is what our children were taught. This is what a whole generation, me included, I'm almost 50, I'm 49, was taught. And it was all codified. It's part of a project, my friends. In the 11th century, this note goes on to say, the great Muslim scholar Al-Biruni mastered the Sanskrit language and left us an impressive and critical account of the achievements of the Hindus in sciences and philosophy. India's spirit of comprehension and forbearance influenced the Mughals, and the cultural activities of India between the 14th and the 19th centuries illustrate Hindu-Muslim collaboration. In science and literature, music and architecture, in painting and dancing, there was a notable synthesis of Hindu and Muslim ideas. It could be argued that at independence, the wounds of partition were still raw. It was best not to scratch at them. But could the whole truth remain shrouded in perpetuity? Over 2 decades later, the Committee on School Textbooks of the Government of India in 1969 continued with the project of secularizing history. While paying lip service to the idea that there can be no compromise with truth, the committee went on to recommend. It's very interesting. In view of the fact, in teaching Indian history in the past during British rule, stress has often been laid on religious differences and conflict. It is necessary that we should now highlight those situations, and there are legion where people of all religious faiths have worked together in unity and cooperation, where certain facts of history are important in themselves and cannot and indeed should not be ignored. They should be used wisely to show how ugly these episodes of the past are, things of which all of us should be ashamed, and everything should be done to avoid them in the future. All this is very nice. Then it goes on to say, this would obviously involve, very important, a creative and purposeful reinterpretation of history. Reinterpretation of history, my friends, and judicious selection of historical truths. You cherry pick what you want out of your history to whitewash the past. The interests, and what was this done for? The interests of national unity and the needs of a modernizing society should be the primary consideration in our choice and presentation of the material. Today, when Modi is pivoting India back to reclaim its Hindu dharmic civilization past, they have launched a very effective global campaign to allege that the BJP RSS is turning India into a Muslim Pakistan. A Hindu theocratic state where all others will be excluded, persecuted and eliminated. So if anyone now wants to go back, remember what people talk about, truth and reconciliation. South Africa. If there is no truth, there can be no reconciliation, my friends. And if you tomorrow want to go back into your history that was purposefully reinterpreted to decolonize it, you are accused of turning India into a Hindu Rashtra, into a Muslim Pakistan. Now let me just tell you that this is really an impossibility, and it features in another chapter in the book. This is what we write. If India were to become a Hindu Pakistan, an outcome that Tharoor feared in his speech, it would need to first mandate that only a Hindu could occupy the post of president. For Pakistan, when it officially became an Islamic republic in 56, has added such a proviso, giving pride of place to Muslims and disqualifying non-Muslims on the grounds of their identity. But this is unthinkable in a country like India, my friends, which has had 5 non-Hindu presidents, including APJ Abdul Kalam, who was backed by a so-called Hindu nationalist government led by the BJP in 2002. Even Vajpayee's government was called a Hindu nationalist government. Don't forget that. Today they are actually holding up Vajpayee as a secular overlord. In fact, he always was, always will be, just like the tradition of the RSS has been. The next step towards a Hindu Pakistan would be introduce a repugnancy clause in the constitution like the Pakistanis did almost 7 decades ago. It had then read, no law shall be enacted which is repugnant to the injunctions of Islam as laid down in the Holy Quran and Sunnah, herein referred to as injunctions of Islam, and existing law shall be brought in conformity with such injunctions. Now just imagine this in India. For this purpose, a Council of Islamic Ideology was formed to ensure consistency between Islamic and modern law. The Hindu equivalent in India, if this were to happen, would would be to have a Dharam Parishad of sadhus, gurus and other Hindu religious experts who would have to examine every single law in our constitution and penal code on the touchstone of conformity with Hindu sacred texts, of which there are numerous. This would be, to put it mildly, a cumbersome exercise. It's almost impossible. Can you imagine getting 3 Dharam Gurus to agree on which is the text which is going to guide us? My friends, we should use our logic sometimes. We suspend it. And imagine the disagreements. Because there would first have to be a consensus of which text or collection of texts to consider with all their prescriptions, even contradictions, as a fundamental reference point. And as established earlier, it is somewhat antithetical, given the flexibility of the interpretation and tolerance of such scriptures within Hinduism. We sometimes have a problem even describing ourselves as Hindus. And we are talking about creating a Hindu Pakistan. Something is very wrong. Okay, but supposing by a leap of faith that such a consensus was to emerge over time, the next step towards being a Hindu Pakistan would be to formalize Hinduism as a state religion, as Pakistan Constitution of 73 declared Pakistan an Islamic state. Once this is done, a Hindu Pakistan would have to declare that not just the president, but even the Prime Minister has to be a Hindu. After this, a Hindu Pakistan would have to start identifying heretics. Think about this. What do they do in Pakistan? If you don't follow the faith, you are described as a heretic. Ahmadiyas, so many. And you know what happens to them. So within the Hindu fold, we would have to proceed to declare some people as non-Hindus who don't follow that one text that we have. Some bunch of sadhus have decided will be the guiding force. Just like Pakistani Parliament declared Ahmadiyas as non-Muslims in 74. If we don't even consider, half of ourselves don't even consider ourselves as Hindus, practicing Hindus, guided by a dogma, how do we identify the heretic? We have 6 traditions and countless more. Who is amongst us? Some people eat some kind of food, some people eat another kind of food, some people speak another kind of worship one God, somebody worships another God. How do you say that, no, your God is supreme, but there is only one God and that is Ram? Think about it. I have postulated that not a Hindu Pakistan, but Bharat could aspire towards a Hindu Britain. Now, you will find this strange. Britain has an official religion, Anglican Christianity. It is curious that Britain, which nudged modern Indian constitutionalism towards the liberal idea of secularism, would itself continue with an arrangement that has been associated with a parochial conservatism. So they told us, they decided to be a religious state, but they told us, no. You can't be. And it does so unapologetically. England's national flag is based on St. George's Cross. St. George is venerated as a crusader who died defending the faith. In Britain's national anthem, God Save the King, there are 6 references to God, and there's little doubt which God. They're not certainly praying to Allah there, or to Ram, or to Krishna. It's Jesus Christ. In 2011, at a speech in Oxford on the 400th anniversary of King James' Bible, we have a problem in Modi going to consecrate the Ram temple. In 2011, at a speech in Oxford on the 400th anniversary of the King James Bible, the then Prime Minister David Cameron called for a revival of traditional Christian values to counter Britain's moral collapse. We are a Christian country and we should not be afraid to say so. Let me be clear. I am not in any way saying that to have another faith or no faith is somehow wrong. I would and fully respect that my people in this country do not have a religion. And I'm also incredibly proud that Britain is home to many different faith communities who do so much to make our country stronger. But what I'm saying is that the Bible has helped to give Britain a set of values and morals which make Britain what it is today. Supplant the word Christian, my friends, with Hindu and remove the reference to the Bible, and Cameron sounds almost word for word like RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat. But what do we call Mr. Mohan Bhagwat? Communal. My friends, in these ways and more, this book is a meticulously researched argument exposing the hollowness and the malign motives behind the claim that India under Modi is going to become a redoubt of Hindu exceptionalism, of Hindu hate. That is what I have tried to address. I'm going to wrap it up because all of us are confronted by this question repeatedly. The book's title, Modi in India, that India there. It's in all caps actually. It is actually a reference to the alliance. One eye, as they say in that alliance, champions inclusiveness, they say. Because you see, Modi is not inclusive. That what he's doing is not going to breed inclusivity. My friends, I could not remain objective, unbiased. When someone without facts, after having creatively repurposed our history, were lecturing to us about now the perils of rediscovering it. How can you remain objective about that? So I am unapologetically unobjective. Thank you very much. Thank you.